So our one and only Shai Frenkel with his talk, a quick guide for how to manage being 40 companies at the same time. So Shai, welcome.
Thank you very much, Migle. So yes, indeed, this is the subject, and I think that before I'll even introduce myself, I'll jump right in and let you into one of my biggest dilemmas. 1 second. When I started at Wix, okay, we'll call it the Wix editor dilemma, and I'll need your help to kind of try to see what was the right thing to do. So I'll give you a brief. As you know or don't, I joined Wix like 4 years ago, something like that. So I came, took me a few weeks to kind of settle down, learn what's going on. I had a great mentor, which I think is also here on the call, Erez. And once I kind of settled down and started to think, okay, I know what I'm doing, I started to do my job. I went to meet the groups in Wix to kind of try to understand what's going on. How do we do testing? It's kind of on me in a way. So the first group was the editor. It was editor and viewer back then. This was the biggest group in Wix. And in 2 words, because many of you probably don't know what it means, the editor is what you see here. If you want to build a site in Wix, one of the options, open the editor, design it, save it, publish, and you have a website. The viewer is actually the code that takes all the data we keep about your website and translates it into a website, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So this was the biggest group, so I started there. And my goal was to kind of try to improve stuff, right, as a QA manager. So I met the team leader. At that time, we had 1 team leader and about 10 very talented QA engineers that were working very hard to get this product in the best way they can. And I asked the team leader, okay, so how's it going? Are you working closely with developers? Are you happy with the quality? And he said, you know, yes and no. I said, what do you mean? He said, okay, first of all, the good news, we have about 7,000 automatic end-to-end tests, Java, Selenium-based, simulating many, many scenarios that you can do in the editor. And this kind of gives us a good coverage. So I said, okay, so where's the problem? The problem starts when, first of all, these tests run at night, kind of all night long. And when we have a version we want to deliver, we run it. And in the morning, we kind of see that most of the tests fail. And then starts a few days of analyzing what happened. It could be flaky tests because it's kind of end-to-end, you know, they're kind of more flaky. And in many cases, it was the developers that just moved forward, changed their code, and maybe didn't update the QA, so it took us some time to understand. And while we're fixing that, he said, we're starting to get more kind of, it calls cherry picks, like more things that you want to push into this version, some bug fixes they found. All in all, it takes us about 3 weeks with some manual work to deliver 1 version of the editor. Okay, so I asked him a few more things. How is kind of the connection with the developers? Do you think that they're actually kind of care about quality? Do they test their code? He said, I think, to be honest, they kind of finish their code, throw it over the fence, mark it as ready for QA, and this is what we get. So, okay, this is kind of troubling news. You know, I was still new, trying to understand, but of course, the first thing to do after talking to the QA guys is to go to talk to the management of this group. So I met the R&D manager of the editor and also the manager of this group. We said the 3 of us, and I kind of asked the same questions. Okay, the question was, how are you happy with the QA group that you kind of work with? Okay, are you happy with the quality? How things are going? And over there, the answers were a bit different. The first very, very clear answer was, Shai, listen up. Today, the editor is the bottleneck of entire Wix, okay? This is kind of something that we cannot live with. Okay, it takes us 3 weeks to deliver a version, and you know the editor is actually we could look at it as kind of a platform because some of the verticals and other groups kind of rely on the editor. So you would hear many times people say, "Okay, we just finished an amazing feature, but we need to wait for the editor to finish their delivery so you'll be able to use it." And this is 3 weeks. So this is a major pain. And I asked them, okay, so how, and what about the developers? Do they test what they do, or they're like, you know, the guy from the QA said, just throw their code? And over there, they were kind of honest. First of all, they say, yeah, probably you're right, and this is what's happening. But for them as managers, they just couldn't understand how it could be. Like they know that the developer should work with some automation on the side that kind of gives them feedback while they write code. And this is the right, and they really couldn't understand how to change it. They even said, if we can have kind of, you know, a QA champion or manager, or you can come maybe and tell us how do we do QA better. This will really change things. Okay, so this is the first dilemma, and I'll need your help. Now, I know that some of you already know what we did after this kind of dilemma, so I don't need your answer. I need all the rest that can trying to guess. And I give you 3 options of what we did after this kind of dilemma. And I remind you, I was kind of new, I think, in Wix. So these are the 3 options that you will need to choose. What would you have done? First option is just to take all the QA and the tests and say goodbye, just spread out to other companies. Another option is to just to get the developers to join in, teach them a bit of Java, and once they're kind of owners of the same test suites, things will get smoother and more coordination between the groups. Another one is to kind of take our heaviest guns, like very strong automation people from the guild, from all around, and tell them, make this automation much more strong, much more reliable. And then we can kind of rely on it, and the 3 weeks will probably squeeze. Okay, so we took actually one of these roles, and I'll tell you later what happened, but now I need you in the chat to kind of choose 1, 2, or 3. What would you have done? What do you think is the right way to do when this is your case? I'm looking at the chat to see 1 or 2. I see 1, 2, 2. Everyone, we're gonna wait till everyone to write, so you can just go again. Okay, 2. Anyone? No, you couldn't leave me like that. I need no more numbers. 3, okay. Okay, so I don't have a full picture, but it looks like a few chose 2. Yeah, this sounds like the right number that people are choosing. So I'll just tell you exactly what happened. And what actually happened that we did was that, okay, let's wait with that, because I didn't introduce myself well, so maybe I'll do it now, and I'll stop sharing for a sec. So you will see me. Opa, 1 second. Okay, so this is me again. So I'm going to talk a bit about myself so you'll know who's talking. So as you saw, my name is Shai Frenkel, and I'm 46 years old. I live in Israel, actually in the north of Israel. Probably live the person that far from the office as all the others in Wix. I joined Wix like 4 years ago. I live here on a mountain in the north with my wife and 3 kids. I think that before Wix, I had a few adventures. I had my own startup. I was a founder of a startup for a few years. I think that in this experience, you actually learn everything you can about business, about the software world, out of hiring developers, firing developers, going over legal stuff, running an office, marketing your products, talking to people that fund your startup. And all of this thing was kind of part of the adventure. Before that, I worked in Cisco Systems for a few years. I was a developer there. Then I moved to be kind of a manager of an automation group that kind of pushed things forward. And actually, Cisco was a company that bought another company that I worked. So this was kind of my world for a few years. Had a few more roles before, but this is more or less my kind of modest history before I go on. Opa, now I'll share again. So where were we? Before I tell you what happened with the editor dilemma, I want to kind of go over our journey's agenda. And I didn't try just agenda because I don't have like slide that will teach you items by the book. I'm just going to share some things on my journey at Wix in these 4 years, some very small amount of the insights and things that we're kind of learning after looking at the entire Wix QA. So it will be like, first of all, to talk a bit about forget everything you know when you're trying to analyze the right QA model in a company that you join. Second, I will tell you what happened with this kind of first dilemma. Then I think that for the rest of the items, I will need to tell you a bit about how Wix is structured, a bit what does it mean, a company or a guild, very briefly. Then I will kind of try to tell you what differentiates companies and why it's kind of so different, so important when you're trying to kind of build a QA model, which is the next item. Then we talk about not just building a QA model, but talking about QA guidelines and red flags that they raise. And we're going to talk and have some questions if you have them. I was preparing to kind of talk maybe about another thing, but I will probably not have enough time, so I'll keep it for my next meetup that will probably happen soon. Okay, you're ready, right? Let's go. So before we talk again about this dilemma, one, it's kind of a disclaimer, but something to kind of share, okay? When you join a company like Wix or any company as a QA manager, I think one of the things you need to do is really to forget what you know already about QA or QA approach, because if you work, for example, you have some drawings here in a company and that builds missiles with cameras, and you know that you cannot have even one bug, of course, and then you come to Wix, it will not work, right? Same if you work in Cisco and your code is on chips and every upgrade needs to kind of send patches to the labs, etc. It's not easy, okay? You don't have tolerance to bugs this way. Also, if you have an application and it's an application that controls your bank, you cannot have bugs. On the other hand, if you have like a very stupid game below and this is it, this is the product, then you don't even need any QA and you can have bugs, you will fix them. Now, Wix is somewhere, I wouldn't say in the middle, more maybe to the last part, but it's special. And I think until about 2 years ago, you could say that it was mainly a company that the product is on the web, which means that, first of all, if you have a bug that you want to fix, you can fix it server side, and quite quickly you would see the reflection of your fix. And this is kind of something that's important. Also, the type of users that Wix has is small, medium, micro businesses, and even consumers in a way. Okay, so it means that if you'll have a bug, probably no one will die. Okay, of course, it could damage a lot, but this is the world you're entering. Now, I said 2 years ago because Wix is changing. And in the last, I'm not sure if it's exactly 2 years, we've added a few more aspects. First of all, we became also a B2B company. We're starting to work with big companies that kind of bring tens of thousands of users. So with them, it's a different way to work. We're also a hardware company because we're selling cashiers with the point of sale features that we're offering to our store owners online. Okay, so now things are a bit more complicated, and we're also turning to developers that their tolerance to bug is different, but I'll stay a bit back with the basic main features of Wix. So what I'm saying is that you really need to adjust the way of testing to the place you're coming, and it's kind of a disclaimer. I'm not sure who is here in the crowd, many people, but if you are working, for example, in this missile industry or bank account apps, don't take everything I say and do it the day after. It might be not so good for you. Now let's go on. And I want to tell you what we did, okay, with this dilemma with the editor. What we actually did after discussing and getting a mutual understanding is this. Okay, we actually took the QA out of this group. We moved every one of those talented engineers to a different group where he will have more impact. And we kind of wanted to see what will happen. Of course, we didn't create a vacuum. We kind of worked with the management to see how it works. And how do you think it worked? Was it a disaster? Well, here are a few things that happened after we kind of took out the QA in this specific case with this specific management, okay? So first of all, let's say from the field, from the developers of this group, they started to develop a new type of automation that really fit to what they needed. It was fast and light, but it starts to adding more and more coverage. Okay, about the 7,000 tests I mentioned before, when we went out, we just turned them off and that's it. They're non-existent anymore. Another very interesting thing that happened is this group started to invent new gradual deployment methods. What does it mean? This is something we use now in all of Wix. When you deploy your code to production, it is gradually. First, it kind of opens up only to Wix employees for a while to see nothing is broken. And then gradually, it starts to be published to more and more users. It could be like 5% of the user will start see your code. And meanwhile, we're monitoring all the KPIs. So in case your code broke something, this will automatically roll back the code and you'll have to fix it. This is already happening, and this is a major effect to the speed of what we have in Wix today. And the third one is kind of the one that no one can really argue with. If we said that before it was 3 weeks per delivery, now it could be even 3 days, 3 deliveries a day. Okay, so it's actually the editor version, maybe once a day, it's kind of pushed into production, and viewer, it's kind of few days a week. And this is amazing. If I told you that this was the bottleneck of Wix, what does it mean? Like from 3 weeks to 3 times a day. Crazy. Okay, now you're probably asking yourself, okay, you took the QA out. What about quality? What's going on there? Well, probably it could be a bit better. We did get stuck in some places when we didn't have this QA person to kind of solve some stuff. But all in all, there was no drastic change in quality. And even if there was a bit of change, all the 3 items before kind of knocks it out in terms of what needs to be done. And this was kind of a great success. And I think that the last thing I wrote is we experiment, because this is what we do in Wix. We sometimes take kind of adventures or experiments to see what happened in this case. And I think it's a lot because of the talented group in the editor and also the management that really proactively started to fix things and not just say, okay, we're taking QA. This got us to such great results. Okay, now I'm going to tell you a bit about Wix and the structure of Wix. So later on, I could kind of refer to it in my investigation of QA model. Okay, so we have something called companies and guilds. I'll start to talk about that. So Wix was founded in 2006, like 15 years ago. It kind of started to grow and grow. Of course, it was a very young startup with great vibes and energies, but as it grew, the management kind of started to want to keep this kind of startup mode. And every time it grew to some level, they started to split it into companies. Now, I'm not saying they split it into departments, companies. And the reason is that each company had their own independent kind of future to take care of. Okay, they have like a CEO, a product manager, even an HR, of course, developers, QA. There were one department, but they were kind of their fate was in their hand. And for example, if they needed to wait for something to succeed, they would just run and do it. And in this way, every company would still be able to work like an independent startup with the flexibility that we have today. Now, when it was 2 companies, it's nice, but actually now, a few years later, we're about 40 companies. Okay, this is the situation, and this is where the title of this presentation comes for. So these are kind of examples of 4 companies out of these 40. You see blog. Everyone that wants to build a blog in Wix will probably use the services of this company. And it has developers, front-end, server, server, mobile, and QA. Now, if you look horizontally, every group of people with the same profession are under one umbrella organization, the guild. If we look at the QA guild that we have today, for example, I think we're more than 150 people already. And all of these people in the drawing are kind of part of this QA guild. But a part of these people, we have core guild, which are a few people, actually more than 30, that give services to all the rest. Okay, and I'll tell you in a few words what are those services. So this could be the services. We build automation framework for all the rest of the people to use. We have boosters in case, let's say you have some company that the QA is new or needs a change. We bring someone very senior to kind of boost things up. Of course, we take care of the growth of everyone in the guild, even if he's kind of somewhere alone. We have someone that is the owner of his growth, kind of see that he's growing. We do bug hunts, we do onboarding, education. We build tools. We have experts in specific fields that you can come and kind of ask and learn from. We also have lately, in the last couple of years, we added the integrators, which after we identified that in Wix, because of this company model, whenever there's something that is cross Wix, we have a project that everyone needs to do something, we saw that we have to have special force to kind of join these kind of activities and arrange it so all the QA people in the companies will know what it's about and be organized. This is the QA guild services in a nutshell. Okay, so now that you know what our company is, and you remember that I joined as a guild manager, I tried to kind of try to understand what are the differences between companies. So I started to compare them very, very quickly. I could see that they're different. It's not comparing apples to apples. It's kind of comparing apples to oranges. But later on, when I started to deep dive and compare more, I could see that it's not apples and oranges. It's something like that. Okay, it's a fruit salad of companies. I couldn't find kind of 2 companies that are more than a few aspects the same. And I'll give you some example of what are the parameters that kind of make them different. So when I say fruit salad, first of all, the size, you could have a company with 10, 20 people and another company with 200 people. You can have one company with a lot of integrations, very complex product, and another which is kind of off the shelf, some kind of app that joins the rest of the apps. We have different risk levels. Some handle money, like payments. They handle like $1 billion already, kind of running around the internet. And some companies have many, many users. So if you have a small bug, it will just affect a few million people. So this is something to take care of. Some use more the mobile app integration, some less. And sometimes it's not just about the content, it's just the people there, the management, the process, the team's maturity that could really show difference between two almost identical companies, but they will just act so differently just because of that. We have some companies that have complex user flows that takes a long time and complicated test bed because this is what they handle. And it could be also companies, again, around people that the automation knowledge they have there and the motivation maybe of developers is not as high as another company. So everyone has their own culture, and this is what we're kind of working with, kind of maybe 40 companies that are kind of different. So now you're probably saying, okay, so maybe the QA at least is kind of organized in this company and we can rest with that, but then the answer is no. And the QA is kind of spread it into the companies in a very, very different way. So here I just listed some examples of I call it QA models or structures in the companies. You can go to one company and find that you have a QA team leader with 9 QA engineers, and they're not doing automation. This is done by the developers. You can go to another company, you have 1 QA team leader, an automation leader, 5 QA engineers running automation and also doing other stuff. Another could be 3 QAs doing only automation, but not really into kind of looking at the full picture of this company's product. Some companies do not have any QA at all. And in many companies, you would find 1, 2, 3 QA engineers spread in the company without any QA team leader. We also have a case when you would see a QA engineer doing automation. Well, when they need some manual work to be done, we have like an external team inside Wix that kind of give him some support. In short, this is a fruit salad as well. Okay, but it could maybe sound like I'm saying fruit salad and it's just like something negative, but I think it's the opposite. Okay, this fruit salad, the colorful fruit salad in Wix is what gives the flexibility of our engineers to really build amazing things. It's kind of somewhere that creativity and innovation could really strive because we don't have those frames that every company kind of need to follow in order to be like everyone else. This really brings freedom and mobility between groups. So you really want to keep it running. Of course, you want to be as effective as possible and to connect some of the things, but this is something in the culture of Wix that is really kind of something important for us to keep. Okay, so this was kind of the structure of the companies, but what about the development cycle? Probably everything there is kind of very organized. So again, it depends who you ask and what's your point of view. I think that if you'll ask maybe top management, their vision or what they think is kind of close to reality is something like that, very organized, like pharmacy drawers, everything kind of very organized with automation, flows. This is what they want. Well, actually, when you start looking around and seeing what's going on in the field, you would say, I would settle for something like that. Okay, you see all the fruits are in the right place, right groups, but there's room here for a bit of a mess or interaction between things. This is more of something that connects to reality. And this also connects me for later, like to kind of an insight that there's nothing, it's not black and white. It's very, very rare to see, a company that is perfect, that is kind of by the book, everyone is doing perfect. So if this company is there, you can really apply any new trend in QA or development because they're so perfect. It's always something alive and kicking that needs to evolve and improve over time. Okay. So again, going back to me, trying to find some QA model that will fit these companies. And when I say QA model, It's kind of make a definition. If I am a new company in Wix or an existing company in Wix, you go to the QA guild and you ask, what do you recommend? How should I look like? What should I do? Should I have automation by developers or by QA? What should be the dev QA ratio? Should I have a team leader? Do manual regression? Should the QA be gatekeepers? These are all kind of questions that we wanted to try to answer and say, this yes, this no. So we're starting to kind of gather all these kind of rules and framing, and we saw it just didn't fit. Naturally, we started then to maybe have categories of companies because they're not all the same. So maybe we said the ones with high risk, we'll put them in one group, behave in one way. The others, maybe that has, I don't know, different aspects, they're kind of platform companies, it will be different. But I think in any division we made, it just didn't make sense. We couldn't kind of take a formula and apply it. Okay, so this was the thing. So we kind of got back to the drawing board and trying to think, so what do we do? Okay, and then we kind of started to think, okay, this is a mess. It kind of, we have some insights, of course, out of it, but it doesn't give us what we need. So we started to ask, okay, what do we know? Okay, what we can assume that this is either good or not good. Let's start with that. And here again, I will need your help because I'm going to kind of throw a few ideas of what is kind of things that we know. And I want to see that you kind of think like me or not. So the first, let's start with the easy one. Manual regression. I mean, regression, it's not progression. It's actually looking at lists of test plans that you want to run every release manually. And this is what I'm talking about. So the question to you, and I want you to answer in the chat, is it good? Is it bad? Does it depend in anything? Please write in the chat. I see, I don't know, I see 2, but I don't know if it's before. Waiting for your, okay, 3, 3, 1. Good, bad, more people. Very bad, someone said. Ah, Migle, it's you. Okay. 2, 3, depends. Okay, okay, I can see the vibe. Okay, so of course, the obvious would say manual regression takes a long time, slows everyone. In some cases, after a while, it's also a bit tiring. So it's naturally, it's a bad thing. But then we do it sometimes. Why do we do it? It gives some value, right? Okay, and then you could go to companies, 1 second, and kind of start to check it. And my point here, and I'll go back to this point, it's not about being good or bad, but if you see a company that has, let's say, a lot, okay, of regression, manual regression, this is a flag, and a flag means you should ask questions. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. For sure, the QA engineer that does it, he is saving the situation now. But we should ask the question, why do we have it? And then, you know, we have 40 companies, we'll talk about it, but once we ask the question, we might get some answers that, you know, that will kind of justify having those manual tests. So if I need to kind of collect a few typical answers for the question, if you go to a company and ask them, why do you have manual testing? I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just asking why. These would be some of the answers, okay? One classic answer, we don't have an automation framework for what we need, so we're doing manual regression, okay? So it doesn't mean it's bad, it's good that we're doing it. Because we're doing it, we can deliver, but it's bad practice over time because of the things I said before. More thing, a company could say, we're kind of in experimental mode, it's a product, we're probably not gonna use it, we don't want to invest in automation. Sounds fair. Some of them have complicated long scenarios that they just cannot automate. Some of them have lack of motivation and knowledge to automate. Developers don't want to do it, and so they're not doing, and they have someone doing manual regression, and this is what they do. Some of them are kind of in putting out fire mode, okay, and they want to do automation and stop the manual regression, but it's in lower priority all the time. Some are kind of moving target. They know that they're changing stuff. It will kind of kill velocity to start chasing around automation. So this is the solution. And some have kind of high risk companies. And these companies, for example, they cannot use what I said before, the gradual rollout thing. Of course, they're going to use it and gradually roll out, but it's not good enough. For these companies, for example, the ones that are responsible for all the online stores we have in Wix. It's a lot of money, it's people's business. You cannot say, what a nice day. I just opened my feature to 5%. That's it. And it failed. So I rolled back. 5% is a lot. Okay. It's not just some button that moved a bit. It could be business of someone. That's why they have to do more measures of testing. And it's good in some cases to do some manual regression. It's a decision. Okay. Until now, this was one. But one of the options that you would hear, maybe some of you already thought about it because you saw what we did in the editor. So let's just stop doing manual regression and see what happens. Let's take it kind of a system to handle it. So it is very, very tricky. What happened in the editor was really kind of maybe a connection of many, many things that happened. But if you just say, I'm going to stop manual regression, what you have to say if you're a manager of a company, what are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other steps you're going to do to replace it? Okay, for sure you have to have automation. For sure you need to make sure that you have people that will do the automation and not just say that they will do it. Okay, it could be a tricky thing, and we'll talk about it in a minute. So I would not use this as a method. The manual regression is there to help, but you need to find a way to reduce it even to 0 if you can, if it's relevant. I'm going to a second kind of guideline, okay, guideline that we have. And the guideline, I want to kind of ask you, if QA in a company or in a team is considered a gatekeeper, what does it mean? It means that every code that the developers in this group kind of wants to deploy, every bug fix, new feature, has to go, the QA person kind of checks, see that nothing is broken, gives a thumb up, and we can go on. So again, please write in the chat. Is QA being a gatekeeper, is it a good thing, a bad thing? It depends. Erez says 2. I see 3, 1, 3. Some people kind of copied from the last time. Cool. Okay. So we have all the answers tending to 3. Okay. So for sure, technically, if there's no other information, gatekeeping for QA is bad. What does it mean? That the developer cannot push his code, they need to wait one QA to be a bottleneck, everything goes through him? This is not good. But why do we say it depends? Okay, because we do have gatekeepers in some of the companies, and you could say it's a bad thing, but it is there. Why is it there? It's kind of protecting us from something that maybe we need to solve. Okay, and I showed it, I think, to management, and they were kind of, what? We have these cases? What do you mean? Why should we have a case like that? So I said, I'll go check it out. So I went to one of the teams, I talked to the team leader that I know that over there, he said, everything goes through QA. And I asked him why, it's very slow. He said, no, it's kind of a very simple, simple answer. If we don't gatekeep and check everything for this specific team, there's kind of 90% chance that their code will break and they'll have to roll back. Okay, so this is what he said. Again, it's a bad thing, but in this case, it kind of saves the day and this group kind of can deliver. It means that something is wrong in this development group. We have some, like I told you, it's not a clean environment. We have some cases. In that case, it's a new team, not yet organized. The flow is not really running. It's a kind of a complicated product that they don't fully, the developers still don't fully understand the full impact of it. And until this happens, this is the situation. It's not good. Of course, it is bad, but it doesn't mean that we need to stop it. We need to go, not to stop the gatekeeper, but to go back and kind of educate the team, find another way to kind of to improve quality. And if I want to kind of collect, again, like I said before, it just raises a flag to ask question, why do we have it? And these are a few answers that could explain. Explain, it doesn't mean it's good, but you started to know how you can handle it. So kind of reasons for having gatekeepers is when you have young, unstable company or management, and it's a very bad situation. Every development management will say, why? How could it happen? But yeah, it needs fixing, okay? Another is it's kind of the same, low quality awareness by dev, something that needs some education. And in some cases, when there's like complex integration with high risk, and there is some fear like before that developers don't see the full picture, and kind of a senior QA engineer would come and he has the full picture, he might kind of, save the day. Maybe it's needed. But these are kind of a few items. Now I'm going to go to one that is a bit more complicated. If we'll talk about automation. So if, for example, you have a company with the automation that the QA are holding, maybe Java, Selenium, and there's another set of automation by developers, maybe in a lower layer in the pyramid, but they're kind of separated, each covering, of course, doing good work as testing. So the question is in the chat, is it okay? Or like we said before, this situation raises a flag. Okay, I have a few, you saw I kind of narrowed down the amount of answers to 2 because they're starting to get the point. This raises a flag. Having these kind of 2 separate framework of automation, theoretically, it's not something that is good, okay? You will have the situation we had before where automation breaks because developer changed something and the QA is kind of chasing them. We have all the kind of transfer of information. When you have a new feature, the developers should sit with QA, give them information, then always kind of get them updated. I think that the typical situation would be if they work together. Okay, you can even think that developers should own most of the automation, while QA could be the one, QA engineers could be the one developing it, adding more tests, teaching how should we cover things, this for sure, but this will kind of solve all the things. Another reason why it's not good, it's also the numbers. Usually, you can have like a team of, let's say, 8 developers and 1 QA engineer responsible for his own suite of automation that runs. Now, this is 1 person and the developers don't touch his automation or her automation. What happens when he's not there, when he's sick? Okay, everyone gets stuck. It doesn't work. They should all be on top of the same automation kind of framework. This is kind of the best approach, or at least in kind of a connection to understand what each other has. This could also prevent duplication. We see often that QA engineers have their own suite. It's end-to-end. It gives you a different level of coverage. But if someone would look at this type of automation and what developers are doing, it could easily kind of drop a lot of the tests because there's kind of duplication. So we kind of we'll stop here with the list of all those kind of guidelines that we kind of collected, and we kind of want to try to think, okay, so we collected these 3 guidelines, okay, that we said before, like regression, manual regression kind of raises a flag, something to check. If you are a gatekeeper, probably you need to check what's going on. And if developers are not doing automation together with QA, again, we kind of assume that these are 3 things that kind of say that there is a problem. And again, it's not the problem with the QA engineer that does it. He kind of makes the delivery possible, but something is not the best it could be in the entire flow. So how do you apply? Now that you know it, we need to do something. So what we did, first of all, is did a research. We sent our 3 best people in the guild. One of them is Migle, our site leader in Vilnius. Another is Peter, QA manager in Dnipro. And the third is Noah, our operation manager from Beersheba. We just sent them with this kind of guidelines and a few more questions to meet each and every one of the companies, the QA people and also some of the R&D managers. And wherever they saw a flag, they would kind of ask, what is the reason? And they started to collect all the common reasons that kind of from all the companies. And the reason is, if you have the list of top common reasons, this is a great place to start improving stuff. If the common reason of, let's say, mobile testing, mobile app testing is done manually, is that the framework of the automation is not fully covering what is needed, then you know that if you solve that, you're going to touch so many companies. Okay, and another way to kind of apply this kind of guidelines and red flags approach is to catch the company managers when they want to grow. Wix grows all the time. Many developers are hired, and also many QA engineers are hired. So there always comes a time in a company that the development management say, okay, I need another QA because I have so many developers, we have so much work. And maybe this is the time that we want to kind of catch him. Say, wait, what about those guidelines? Do you have red flags? Maybe this is the time, instead of hiring a QA, start fixing something so you will not need to do it. But what happened is when I show it to development managers or developers, for some reason they couldn't understand me. It was like they're talking in a different language. But luckily I was a developer as well. And I know that the language that they use to kind of talk and understand is through APIs. So I wrote this small script. And next time that some development manager wants to come and say, I need another QA in my group, it would need to use this API, okay? Of course, you don't need to go into this code or find bugs or something, but I'll go over the point of it. First of all, I'm writing here that the prerequisite is to have automation framework. Okay, SLED and Detox are two in-house developed automation frameworks in Wix. Detox is actually open source and SLED is internal. So this is something you need because without it, you can talk a lot, but it will not work. And we have those. Okay, so when you want to add another QA, let's say you're a development manager, I will start asking you those questions. First questions, are you following all the guidelines? If you say yes, then go ahead, hire a QA. We trust your judgment. You should have it to the team. You know what to do with it. If, for example, you're still doing manual regression in your group, I could offer you, instead of hiring QA, maybe we can give you a few people for a while to boost your automation. Okay, have more automation. You will not need to hire another manual regression, and we'll kind of be able to change the situation we have today. Okay, and if you have a situation that the developers, they don't automate, they kind of trust QA separately to do automation, then I could tell you, instead of hiring a QA, just hire another developer, but make sure that we will monitor that you are adopting an automation way that you will work together with QA. Maybe it will be better. And again, if you have gatekeepers as QA, we'll just tell you, no, don't hire more people to this situation. Start prioritizing the things that this gatekeeper tests, okay? It's a gradual thing. We don't want to in one day stop testing, but let's start by only testing the big things and start educating the steps before it comes to QA that the quality will be better. And like in every try and catch statement in the code, there's always exceptions. So of course, if we have some complex company, some super weird or energetic situation, then everything we can put aside, and this is Wix. Sometimes you need to run fast. We have great initiatives, so we just join the effort and we trust the manager judgment. So this is kind of a funny way. Actually, when I showed it to the VP of R&D, of course, he understood very quickly because it's in a very interesting language. And he said, okay, if you have this script running, go run it now on all of the companies and see what happens. And this is what we're doing today. This is the research that I mentioned before. We already have kind of results to kind of work with. And let's see how this goes. Okay, I'm getting, I think, to maybe my last slide, and it's kind of going back some of the takeaways that I kind of talked about from my presentation. So the first takeaway is that I think that there's no silver bullet because companies are different, and I think that you don't need to only look at Wix, even outside of Wix. Companies are different. You really, really need to understand what is the DNA of each company, what are the differences, and try to set the right model, or it could be even a temp model for this company. And instead of model, you can just rely on guidelines. And the guidelines just helps you to spot red flags. It doesn't mean that if you have one of those, it's for sure a problem. In many cases, this is what needs to be there. These things with the red flags for a while, probably it could be cases that it's okay, but it helps you ask questions. And like I said, usually if you have red flags, it usually means that a big fix is needed, not around the QA. It could be like the last maybe thing in the road that you need to change. Okay, the QA there is actually saving the day and letting this team deliver, even though some things are not done correctly. So this is why I mean a flag. And about changes, if you want to kind of change something, okay, it should be an holistic change. You cannot just change the way we do QA in a group. Okay, it will not work. First of all, management needs to know that there's a price in quality, a price in velocity that they will get. And as every company is different, every company manager knows the people in the company. And theoretically, there could be some company that maybe developers don't want to do automation so much because they're not into it yet and they need some level of education around it. So this is also a price, a potential price of motivation. to kind of take into consideration. Okay, that every change should be holistic, and we should not expect that the QA will change something and everything else will kind of fall apart. These are the takeaways from this session, and if I remember correctly, this is it for today. Opa. Now we'll see if we have any question, Migle. This is the phase.
Yes. So can you please go to the...
Yeah, I'm going. Where does my start? What is it? Okay. What do you think about AI that Tariq talked about? For sure, very, very interesting. Very, very kind of future thing that we can look. I think we had a look in a few companies in the past. Didn't get to a place that we can actually apply it to something that we did, but I can say that we have a few more things to kind of solve, and then these things are for sure things that we kind of we should use. Around manual testing, is it getting old and now only automation position? Opa, need to move a bit. Only man will be needed in the future, or there is no way around without manual position. Okay, so this comes to what I wanted to talk next time. So I will take like maybe I'll answer the others, and I have a few slides that maybe will kind of jump a peek to what I wanted to say, and it answers this question. But for sure, we'll have, like I said, it's a huge company with more than 150 QA people. It means that, as you saw, in many cases, we do need manual testing. And the word manual testing, this is, I think, the secret of the answer that I will tell in a second. What does bug hunt mean as a guild service? Okay, it's a good question. Like I told you, the core guild is something that is kind of outside of the companies. We give services. And in some cases, we have a QA engineer in one of the companies and some new feature that sometimes it touches others. Sometimes it's just very, very new with many, many aspects that could go wrong. You could order this service, and then we have like a very talented senior people in the guild. One of them is Anna, for example, from Kiev, that organizes a bug hunt. It's an event. It could be an hour. It could be a day that we're getting prepared for, and we bring as many people as we can from the guild, from outside the guild, from other groups, to kind of, we can look at it as kind of play with this new feature, try to find bugs. It's all kind of with, have a website that every bug could be reported, and kind of trying to do a bit of gamification, and everything is kind of ordered in that, so not that everyone will do exactly the same. And the target is to have a lot of fresh eyes, to give a lot of feedback also to the product managers of new users. So we do it every once in a while. If someone wants it, he just orders for it, and it happens. Okay, your opinion, what is the most used automation tool? Which one you're using right now in Wix? Same questions. What programming language for automation most used in your opinion? Which one you are using in Wix? Okay, it's kind of a long answer, so I'll try to be kind of brief. I'll stick to, automation around web. I'll put mobile aside because it's also a long answer to begin with. In Wix, in the last few years, we have a very reliable framework in Java and Selenium that QA engineers are mainly using to have end-to-end tests. But around 2-3 years ago, we introduced a new framework that was developed by the front-end guild. It's called SLED. You maybe saw it before. It could be used for end-to-end scenarios as well. And it runs on Lambda, very, very fast. This is with JavaScript, not with Java like the first one. And it's getting more and more momentum because it runs on Lambda and it's part of the CI. We're getting to use it more and more. Developers are using it and QA are using it. In some companies, the QA engineers push it into the company, teach the developers, and at the end we have like a lot of tests. This is something that we want to have more and more of, the SLED, but still the Java Selenium still holds a lot of coverage and a lot of things that SLED, which is more new, doesn't have at this point. What else was there? Most used in your opinion? This is what we do in Wix. Second, scrolling. How many automation engineers is optimal? Following guidelines, not taking into consideration. It depends. Like without saying it depends, you want an answer, but it depends. Like, Okay, it depends on the size of the company. If it's a company with 50 developers or 5 developers, of course the number will be different. I'm sorry, I don't have like one answer. It needs more data to give a smart answer. How do you keep motivation inside your team? It means inside the group. Okay, this is also kind of a long thing, but this is part of the roles of the guild is also around that. Like I said before, what we do is make sure we connect, even though it's already 150 people. I think all of them are connected either to their team lead or to someone in the guild. We have the basic thing that's kind of obvious of motivation, which is, you know, meeting together, learning, having fun together, and things like that, present, etc. But I think that one of the main aspects that we're also very, very focused in the last year or so is taking care of the growth path of the people. We kind of work that every manager, every mentor will be sure to work on the growth path of every engineer. Growth doesn't mean moving to whatever. It could mean anything you do, but kind of setting up a plan is something that we find for sure motivating and something that everyone wants. People want to grow. So we're actually next week, if you're asking, I think even Migle is about to come to Israel, and this is exactly the subject we're gonna talk, and we kind of try to build a map of all the growth paths a QA engineer at Wix has. It could be to different directions, you know, even outside of the guild, it's quite fine. And this is kind of one of the, I think, most important things we do around it. Why do you fire developers? Okay, if you're mentioning what I said at the beginning, you know, in a startup, there's this thing called the amount of money you have and amount of money that you don't. And at some point, you know, if the money ends, you need to fire people. This is, I'm talking about a company with less than maybe 10 people. So this is the story. It's not like a sport or something that they do. Okay, there's no more questions, so I'll give you a peek to what I said before for the kind of role of QA. It's just a peek. It's not like fully organized, but I think it's worth it. And it's kind of one more, someone says. And should automation engineer do both automation and manual work, or it's better when it's separated? It's also a good question that I've been looking at a lot. Of course, it depends, and you know, in every company, whatever you have. I personally think that that separation could be better in many cases. It also connects to the QA roles I talk. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work. We have amazing people in Wix that do automation and manual work and doing many more things that I will show in a second, and it works well, but it's more rare. Usually doing automation is kind of a profession. The strong people that do automation, they're usually kind of very technical engineers doing technical thing, which is writing code that knows how to test. And manual, which also it's a bad word, but we'll talk about it in a second, it's a different skill set. And if you combine them, sometimes, you know, if you're not so strong in development, it kind of pulls all your time and you're not able to kind of do other stuff. So this is a general answer, but this is what I can give now. So I'll show you this. Maybe the next slides will also explain it a bit. Okay, so QA roles, this is like, is it manual or automation? We hear it a lot, even now in the question. And like also when we interview people, they always ask how much percentage, etc. So this is kind of, you know, it's slides that I was not sure I'm going to present, but here it is. But if we talk about QA roles in Wix or in general, QA engineers do a lot of things. Okay, all the things you see here is part of it. You know, challenge the product, to give visibility of the quality, of course, fresh eyes to break things, analyze risks, integrated quality, represent the users, do postmortems, and all of that. But what we see, if we look, of course, people in Wix know how to do most of these things, but when you just say manual automation, usually what people maybe from outside would aim to these two things. Manual means manually test before GA. It could be regression or progression a bit, but that's it. And when you say automation, it's implement and execute automation. When you look at the entire list of what we have here, this is a very small portion of what is needed and what is kind of gives value, I think, in the QA role. That's why it's kind of tricky to ask, is it manual or automation? I think that what we're kind of trying to aim to do, of course, we need manual testing before GA, and we need automation, but we also need all the rest and not to be forgotten. That's why we're trying to kind of promote this kind of role. We call it, it's a temporary name, let's call it a QA master. Okay, this is kind of a QA partner, a champion, someone for sure senior. Imagine that a person that, even though I marked an X on automation and manually, it's not because they don't know how to do it or they don't do it, but it's not their main focus. All the rest is their main focus. And as I see, this is more important and more impacting to a company than just doing the other two. Of course, all of them are needed, but if you look at the future, what I think would be more rare to find is people that are kind of senior and have all this perspective and can do things that maybe not just around testing that things work and doing automation. Because this part, some of it could be kind of replaced in when you get to the edge, you can kind of do it somehow, but getting someone to do all of the other stuff I said together and be kind of a partner in a company and give his perspective about QA, this is more rare, and this is something that I think that will be kind of, when we'll talk about next week, Migle, on the growth path, this for sure is a very interesting direction that we see.